I love what Tom said about brand evolution, and I've heard that as a theme in many of the sessions here, where you get someone from Comcast or PureFlix or BritBox or the Weather Channel, and you assume that there's a certain market or there's a certain product or service they offer, and then you hear how OTT is sort of expanding that or allowing them to evolve in different ways and different business models and address different markets. And I think for me, being in this industry, 12 plus years since we started trying to research, that's what wakes me up in the morning. It's interesting, it's always evolving, and I love that. So we're going to talk about money in this session. Business, we got to pay the bills, right? We talk a lot about consumers and what they want, and their opinions, obviously, at the end of the day, drive everything we're doing in this industry. But we want to make sure they keep opening up their wallets to, it seems, an increasing portfolio of services and ad inventory. So we've got another all-star panel here today, and we'll start with, I'll tell you what, you've already met Tom. Why don't we start in the middle this time with Adam from Hearst.
Great. Hey, everybody. My name is Adam Noble. I run ad products for Hearst Television. So part of my job is to oversee our general digital advertising product set, but also specifically as it relates to this, our OTT product, which for us, that means a combination of monetizing our own inventory, but also monetizing a lot of other people's inventory through our reseller products.
Okay, and we'll keep going this way to Bernarda.
Hi, good morning. Bernarda Duarte with Roku. I'm a 4-year Roku veteran, and yes, it is like dog years. We've been the leader in the industry on the OTT side for, since 16 years ago, believe it or not. And really, we've seen the evolution and always been at the forefront of all the new technologies that we're developing, not only for the ad side of the business, but obviously with our SVOD partners. And I lead content acquisition, basically content distribution, really, because I do most of the content deals for apps to channel partners to be on the platform. And I know we do work with the Weather Channel, and we also with Hearst.
Awesome. Lionel.
Hi, my name is Lionel Bringier. I'm with ShareID. So ShareID, we do customer acquisition. We help customers like Comcast Xfinity, like YouTube, like Spotify, like HBO to acquire loyal customers. So we help them when they do some specific discounts to acquire a specific crowd. For example, the Gen Z, the students, the senior people. We verify that the people who apply for those offers are actually who they claim they are. And I've been in this OTT industry for probably 14 years now. I was with AWS Elemental for 7 years before joining ShareID. I just joined ShareID 5 months ago, and before that I was with Anivia. So I know quite a lot about OTT problems. Now I'm on the marketing side.
Okay, Peter?
And I'm Pete Chelala. I'm at Viacom, and I am the VP of digital video, which means my job is to help monetize the content that you guys are all watching. So the video that you can't skip between the content is thanks to me. I work across all brands minus BET, so from Nickelodeon to TV Land, we like to say from diapers to diapers, but we got the full suite. And I feel like we talk about OTT a lot around CTV, but we've been pushing content beyond linear for the past 6 years, because obviously when you're serving the younger audience and the younger generations, they're the ones that buck the trend. And when there's 100 million millennials in the U.S. looking for content on their mobile device, and you're paid because of ratings, it's a very difficult choice to actually release that content to places where Nielsen is not doing you justice. So we've actually had to retrain the market how to buy so that we continue to monetize the content and make more so that you guys can be entertained from obviously mobile screens to the silver screen. But it's been a great ride, an interesting ride, and it's still early. So lots to talk about. Not 40 years for me, but definitely, I think it said 40.
14, yeah, that's the accent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and apparently we're not quite saturated yet. We got 2 SVOD services on an average, and according to Andrew, we can go for a couple more. So open up your wallets a little bit wider. And Sarah.
Yeah, hi, my name's Sarah Eisenberg, and I work in strategic ad tech partnerships at Google. I've been there for about 5 years and work with pretty much our largest broadcast entertainment media partners. My job is essentially to help them monetize, whether it's through direct deals, programmatic deals, or whatever they're looking to do at the moment.
Awesome. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with sort of general, and then we're going to get into a little bit more detailed, specific questions, and we're also going to engage our trenders as well, because we've heard a lot about their content preferences, content discovery, user experience. Now we want to get a little bit more detail about what they're willing to pay for and what they're willing to watch. So let's start off, first of all, again, from a making money perspective. Let's talk about customer acquisition. All of the panelists up here have to make decisions about what segments of the market to go after. So from an OTT perspective, is there any particular audience segment that OTT providers should focus on? And we'll start with Peter.
That's a great question. I feel like there's a twofold answer to that because obviously we're always trying to entertain and inform the youth. So for us, Gen Z and millennials are our target. For one reason, they're very hard to reach. So if you're an advertiser and you have this audience, you are ahead of the game. But also if you're getting into a new space or trying to set a trend, they're the ones that are going to cement that for going forward. So I would say focusing for us, again, Gen Z, millennial, the average median age on TV is 50 years old plus, and then obviously broadcast is 60 plus. So there's plenty of them out there. What's not plenty of is access at volume to a younger audience.
So and Viacom's always sort of been there too, right?
We've been doing that. We've never had the luxury of aging with our audiences, so we're always reinventing ourselves every generation. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right, great. You know?
Yeah, I agree. Gen Z is probably the crowd you want to attract first and foremost because there are a lot, actually. In the US, 26% of the population is Gen Z. So they outgrew the millennials already. They can spend a lot. They have $143 billion with a B dollars to spending power. And they can be great ambassadors for your brand. You know, 75% of the Gen Z, they say that they trust what they see online with social networks. And if they're happy with a brand, they will be great ambassadors because they will tell it on Facebook, on Twitter. And, you know, that's the power of social networks. So if you can acquire Gen Z, you have first-hand access to a lot of people with a lot of spending power, but they can also be great influencers in their social networks and with their parents. And that's also how you can access the seniors. If I look at my parents, for example, there is no way they can change their cable offering or their OTT offering or their mobile service operator. They will ask me or my brother for recommendations. So if you can get the younger generation, you can also get access to their parents.
So Bernarda, for Roku, are there desired segments, or are you trying to serve all the different segments in different ways?
So as a platform, you know, we have an audience of 29 million active subs, right? So as compared to cable, we're probably the third largest distributor from just a sheer number of active subs. And for us, you know, it is a mass product, right? And that was the mentality back in the day when we launched the first Roku box. Little known fact, it was only streaming Netflix back in the day. It was created exactly for just that purpose, to stream Netflix to the television. And from there, we just grew the channel store, right? So now we have over 5,000 channels. And, you know, it's that kind of mass appeal, I believe, is that Roku's offering. When you look at cable as an example, last year they lost about 3 million subscribers, right? So that distribution is shrinking, we're growing. And honestly, it's a combination. The Roku audience is really the TV audience. We're not quite that young as people may think, so it's not just Xers or millennials or Zs. It's definitely more along the lines of a 32-year-old TV viewer, you know, average income, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, from that point of view, it mirrors the overall TV audience.
Okay, Adam?
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. I think if you look at the proliferation of streaming across the space, right, we're talking a couple 100 million people doing it across the United States. But even if you take into account those who are truly cordless, right, so that skews obviously towards a younger generation. The reality is, and you know, over here on the right may be able to echo this, if you don't live with your parents, you're still calling them to get their Xfinity password, right, to get into certain gated content. And guess what? Mom and dad are also calling the kid to get access to the Netflix content. So we're not talking just about necessarily the fragmentation of the user base. I think we're also talking about the fragmentation of matching user IDs and login information to really make sense of the ecosystem. in my view, coming at it from a slightly different perspective in the sense that we are partnering with a lot of publishers, partnering with the Rokus and the Viacoms of the world to bring inventory to advertisers. The thing that sticks out to me is not necessarily defining the very specific niche audiences that are more likely to stream, because I think everybody's streaming. The thing that sticks out to me is defining the streaming habit itself, because the differentiation between getting to the content and what content you view, to me, is the true delineating factor in this emergent space. Because if you define OTT simply as the way we all think about it as a consumer, it's pretty straightforward, right? You get an internet connection, you log into an app or some type of operating system that gives you a library of content, you can watch it anywhere. Hooray, you're now a streamer. But if I am streaming cat video through YouTube, but it happens to be on a Roku device, why is that cat video now 5 times more valuable than it was 2 minutes ago when it was on my mobile device? So that, to me, those are the questions that I think are a little bit more impactful when you get down to the actual content that the viewers are watching. I think the viewership itself is pretty ubiquitous.
So Tom, a slightly different twist on the same question about what the desired audience segments are. We heard from Vlad earlier, he's borrowing an HBO password. We heard about Netflix and so on. And we talked a little about analytics in the previous session. Do we know who that profile is, really? And to be able to monetize it, you have to know who they are. So,
yeah, sure. I mean, so first of all, in the password, we made an intentional decision to go AVOD, right? So we are not worried about people password sharing, and our target is really, in our current iteration, is really kind of the millennial audience that's looking for a different experience in kind of consuming information about their community. So that's kind of the basis of where we start. Certainly, and the great thing about OTT, which is unlike the television side of our business, is we have great census data coming back, and obviously the ability to pair that with other available data. So and we do that. And actually, for us specifically, unlike any other media business I've been in, my biggest employee group is scientists. So, and typically they're on the weather side. So the discipline of data, the discipline of using that to make decisions and target is more pronounced than any other media business I've had the privilege to be associated with. So for us, this kind of evolution into OTT and targetability and really kind of refining what we're trying to do and how we appeal to an audience kind of fits with kind of the existing culture. So. Which is great, because typically a lot of what you do is try to change culture within an organization, and we have some of that momentum already.
And Sarah, how does Google look at audience segment targeting?
That's a profound question. I know. What I would say is that our partners probably look at it from like a whole array of perspectives. I think with specific targeting comes sort of the conflict of scale. So depending on what our partners want to do, whether that be to reach a broad audience or reach a more specific audience, is sort of determines their strategy around how they use that data. Google is incredibly, I would say, incredibly watchful around the data that comes into our own platforms, but I think our partners are sort of figuring out how to balance the data that they have, using it in the right way with the right sort of policies, and to reach a broad enough audience that makes some of the deals that they do worthwhile.
Okay, so we are going to combine a couple of questions here in rapid fire mode, and then I want to get the Trender panel involved in here as well. So the elephant in the room is SVOD versus AVOD, right? So I'm going to start with Sarah this time, is go right up to the line. What's better? What's a better business model, and what's more sustainable over the long term? And you have to make a choice. I know that's mean, but SVOD or AVOD?
Well, I'm going to say AVOD because my job is to help my partners make money. But I actually, the perspective I take on it, and I actually don't like to sit on the fence. I do like to make a choice, but there's obviously value in both. I think sometimes we forget about access. I think there's a huge access issue. So while SVOD is incredibly important in, I think, a more an audience that has more access to be able to pay for a Netflix or an ad-free Hulu or something like that. Those are very privileged segments of the market, of the population in general. There are places all over the country and all over the world where people cannot afford that, people can't access it. It's not always as easy as just sometimes getting the internet connection itself is about as much as people can do. So I think in that sense, it's important to remember that there are all kinds of people that need to be reached, that want to be reached, that want this content. So it really depends on the user base, I would say.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I think certainly the decision between SVOD and AVOD is based on the depth of your library and the uniqueness of your content assets, right? So I think if you're a company that has a deep library and has has a wealth of content assets, then certainly with the right marketing plan and technology platform, I think that's a win for us. As I mentioned, we went AVOD because again our business model is about dissemination of news and information to the largest audience, and we chose the personalization and really the localization element of that to try to supercharge what we're doing on the AVOD side.
Yeah, I mean, Tom and I are in lockstep on this. I mean, I think the reality of AVOD, it does a couple of things for you. I think the first thing it does is it keeps the subscription prices down for those very rich, deep content libraries that are accessible. It also powers the creation of new content. One thing from the Hearst television perspective is we are a local news and broadcasting company. So if you want to bring local news to the masses in a local DMA, I mean, what's fueled that forever has also been the opportunity for local and regional businesses to reach those audiences. So I think there's a yin and yang to how we work and how we interact and engage with our local markets that is not just about, can we sell another ad? It's about how do we connect, our community with itself? How do we connect businesses with local viewers?
I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, even though Roku started, obviously, like I said, with a Netflix partnership. We've seen both businesses, obviously grow on the platform tremendously. Our platform grows 40% year to year. But I will say that AVOD is definitely, for all the reasons that my colleagues have listed, a priority for Roku, and we have been very excited to launch our own AVOD service, the Roku channel, and so we clearly are leaning into that side of the business, and we have seen the number of hours of streamed content to our AVOD partners grow year to year, and it does become a decision of content versus access, et cetera. So we're happy to be able to provide both growth opportunities for our partners.
There's that evolution theme once again. Lino?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, but I'm on a panel and I need to provide a different view, so I will go for SVOD, because if you look at all the business models, all the subscription-based business models seem to be working very well right now. I mean, you can get your clothes through subscription, you can get your meals through subscriptions, you can get your OTT, VOD, and live services through subscription. So yeah, I think it's a trend that is becoming more and more common. Maybe for VOD, there is still a question between AVOD and SVOD, and again, I don't disagree with everything that has been said. For live content, it looks like if you want to have premium content, sports, you have to get through premium content, you have to pay for subscription.
Interesting.
And I'll take the middle ground, because Viacom, as you all know, is a narrative media company. We are obviously built on the economy of attention. So we've been in the SVOD space. We actually go across the whole pay model now. So core basic cable, skinny bundles in the SVOD world. But now we have actually programming to the social platforms. I mean, YouTube, we actually create native programming for that platform. Snapchat shows, Twitter shows, Facebook Watch shows, and then obviously we just purchased Pluto, because that is going to be the cornerstone of our AVOD approach. But to offer consumers the ability to go across the entire pay model for access to content across all types is the game that we're in.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Perfect segue to our Trender panel. So I'm going to ask you guys, what is your favorite show, and would you prefer to have it free, but have to suffer through advertising? Yep. And we can talk later about whether it's suffering or not. Or would you be willing to pay a subscription fee of, let's say, $5 a month for it? And Carissa, we'll start with you. First of all, what's your favorite show, and how do you prefer to pay for it?
My favorite show is Fuller House because I think it's funny, and I would rather it on Netflix and pay the $5 because there's no ads, and most ads are just pointless.
Most ads are pointless too?
Yeah.
Okay, you heard it here. Sophie?
Donna.
I'm sorry, Donna.
That's
Donna,
okay.
sorry.
My favorite show is Billions, and so it's on Showtime, so I pay a premium to watch it.
If you could get it free?
Of course. I would.
But you'd have to have the advertising. You'd have to have the ads. Would you want that show interrupted by ads?
No. No, I would not want to watch that show without ads.
Okay.
With
Urza?
ads.
I don't really have a favorite show, but I wouldn't mind because I usually have my smartphone with me, so during an ad I could be checking my email or something. So.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. I want to talk about this sort of emerging trend of direct-to-consumer. Kurt, I think, covered the concept earlier about brands versus channels versus shows, and we heard from the trenders, in some cases, they resonate with Netflix as a brand. They know they're going to get there. In other cases, there's a show you want to watch, and sometimes you may not even know it's on NBC or Hulu or what have you. Direct-to-consumer has the potential to upset that apple cart a little bit. First of all, who wants to take a shot at defining direct-to-consumer as you understand it? And how is that changing the way brands, whether it's content aggregators, distributors, how does that change how they look at their OTT business model? Who wants to take a shot at defining direct-to-consumer?
I will say that it's every 1 a.m. purchase I make on Instagram from a store that does not exist in a brick and mortar form and sort of gets me based on who they know I am. So I guess if you were to translate that into an OTT space, it really could be anything that's sort of reaching out, directly to the human who's consuming
So
the
sort
content.
of cutting out the middle person in the
Sort of
transaction?
cutting out the middle person, cutting out, I think from the production standpoint, cutting out a lot of the cost for themselves, for themselves versus for the consumer. But I think, it's cutting out the middleman.
Does that mean it's lower quality content then if you're taking those costs out?
I guess TBD, but I haven't had that experience with DTC at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I view it as essentially the disrupting factor of OTT from the business perspective, because if you think of how digital technologies disrupted legacy media, TV has been quite different, and I think will be quite different, right? If you think of magazines and newspaper, you had the fundamental tactile experience of the consumer change, right? So you're talking about multi-billion-dollar infrastructures of major media companies just change on the fly, right? So the entire core of these businesses had to adjust accordingly. With over the top, it's a doubling down on the connected TV, right? We're seeing more and more consumption happening on that big screen. So when I think of that disruption, I think of the direct-to-consumer component of it, because if you are ABC, NBC, Hearst is a very large affiliate group. So we work with all the major networks, and if you are one of these big companies and you no longer need your local affiliate broadcaster, or you no longer need the legacy infrastructure of over-the-air or cable infrastructures to reach the consumer, then the question becomes, all you have to do now is build an app, right? So what happens to that legacy infrastructure is a big question. I also think that the biggest question is there's a huge hierarchy of legal entanglement that's holding that together. So, if you think about how you're accessing content, when you reach cable-gated content, that usually has almost nothing to do with the advertising, right? It's typically some content company making sure that you paid for this premium new show of something somewhere. And that's an important thing to the way that content is licensed today. So I think that the question becomes, is the consumer ultimately going to be the licensor of that content, or can they afford that? And then that comes back to the SVOD versus AVOD dialogue as well.
So Peter, I want to jump to you,
yeah,
but I want to change the question a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Does Red Bull need any of you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, just to jump in on the flip, conversely,
Yep.
there's an app graveyard of millions of apps. It is so hard to launch an app and then keep it up. The ones who are winning are popping. It's really a flip of the coin sometimes. So So it's very difficult to think that DTC is just going to work because you can just skip the supply chain. We are rooted in a supply chain. I mean, I always call Viacom, we're colonizers. We colonize other people's platforms. We are down with OPP for sure. Because they already have a built-in audience. So it may be shrinking, but it's not eroding. As we heard from Andrew, it's not dead yet. It's not going to be dead for a while. But we can also look at Pluto, who's done a great job of building out an audiences, bringing content to a platform and making it free, built by advertising, and we can purchase that and then start to ingest our library, which is Paramount since 1912 and Viacom since 1971. So we have the ability to play across, again, the whole supply chain and the whole pay model, but it's still not easy for us. So imagine not having any of that and coming out brand new.
Okay, Bernardo?
I believe what can be successful, obviously, are the big brands, right? So Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, they have a lot going for themselves, right? They have the brand recognition, they have the depth of library, they probably will come up with a good price point. And, I get this question a lot about, how to be successful in the direct-to-consumer business, right? Because it is getting harder and harder. When I think of direct-to-consumer, funny, when you first asked the question, I thought, oh yeah, that's right. It used to be that we thought of it as just buying online, right? Going to a website instead of going into a store. Now, television has awakened, and even the oldest brands in this country have awakened to what truly that means, right? But it's going to take a minute. Even if you have all those great attributes, it will be hard because you do have a lot of this aggregation, right? And the audiences are looking for content in all different ways and all distribution models. So even for us, the platform grows on a on subscriber base grows maybe 40%, 45% year to year, which has been tremendous over the last, straight 5 years in a row. And those numbers are easy for me to remember because they've been the same since I started at Roku. So it's really, really seeing this transformation of audiences, moving away from traditional models of distribution, taking back control, which is really, in essence, what we did when we started purchasing online, is taking control, right? Because we didn't need to have the salesperson try to sell me something I really didn't like or want.
Mm-hmm. So I was being a little snarky about being cut out of the whole picture, because that's really not what we're talking about. We're talking about adjusting to consumer demand and that sort of more one-to-one relationship with the brands that they're interested in. Lionel, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, it's all about knowing your consumers, knowing the end users. You can be a big brand, you can be ESPN, you can be Disney Plus, you can be Netflix, or you can be a niche player. You have to know exactly what your audience is expecting from you. And we talk a lot about personalized content, personalized ads, personalized experience. It's more and more important. And when you go direct to consumers, that's really one of the first criteria they will take into account. If you watch your content on a big screen, on a smartphone, on a tablet, on silver screen, the experience is totally different. And going direct to consumers means you can tailor the experience to your consumers. So know your customers, and you will be able to address them right.
Well, and I think it does add a level of complexity, right? Knowing, and again, agree with everything, like knowing your consumer. But to me, what is knowing your consumer? Now, knowing your consumer this 5 minutes versus next 5 minutes versus this afternoon, right? Sunny day. So to me, I think it's easy to talk about how do you do it, right? Can a marketing organization, can a media organization be, in essence, in a real-time audience definition mode, right? Because that's the way thing, and you mentioned, 1 a.m. there's a purchase that's made for a different reason than 9 a.m. And is the marketing ecosystem ready for it? Number one, and number two, I always wonder, how does Mercedes sell a car to somebody that's 45 that hasn't seen 20 years of branding, who has established that, hey, there's a lifestyle element and there's other reasons other than the product and that offer at that moment in time for why you're buying a car, right? And we've all, made instinctive purchases, and we've all made well-planned purchases because of the brand that's been built over the years. So I think to me, it's be careful what you wish for.
So great, thank you guys. And you teed up my next question, which is, let's dig a little bit deeper on advertising specifically. One of the promises of OTT is the ability to do more one-to-one matching of content, whether that's entertainment content, infotainment, and advertising inventory to the profile, to the specific individual viewer. So I guess the question is, how would you guys rate industry attempts to make the dream of targeted, programmatic, addressable, personalized advertising via OTT a reality? And on a scale of 1, we're not anywhere close to really there, to 10 being we got it nailed right now, where are we? Sarah, you want to jump in on that?
Sure, maybe a 3. I mean, those are so many buzzwords in one sentence.
I threw them all in there. There's probably more, too.
Impressive. I think, and this was covered in the previous panel as well, there's so much fragmentation, and there's so much that needs to happen at an industry level where everyone in the space needs to come together, whether that's programmers, distributors, networks, platforms, ad tech, to first of all, unify user IDs. Every device has its own ID. Everyone is somewhat a little bit different somewhere else. So I think that's sort of the largest problem for sure. So when you say things like addressable, programmatic addressability, it's sort of like we have to standardize how we recognize people. That's the first issue. And then I think also, again, while OTT is a huge emerging space, it's not where everyone is yet. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time for everyone to sort of come to it. And I think that they will. To your earlier points, my mom has all of my passwords for Netflix and Hulu and everything as, making up for everything she did for me for 36 years. She says the least I can do is give her my streaming apps. But, I think it's going to take a longer time for people to come to these platforms.
Okay, a 3 then. Okay, Adam, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think she nailed it. So I think a 3 is about right. And part of the reason I think a 3 is about right is anyway, everyone's seen Lumascapes, right? I mean, you look at the Lumascape for display, for video, I mean, it's noisy. There's logos everywhere, but there's standards beneath it. So if you think about display, right, you have the MRC for fraud accreditation, you have DFP as pretty much a standard ad server. We've all agreed to kind of play by the same rules, which enable us to scale out based on different audience criteria and data. On the OTT front, none of that exists. So you have some tests going on with the MRC and like at one vendor. You have Freewheel, which is the ad server record for most of the big publishers, but not the ad server record for most DSPs. You have huge gaps between how audiences are defined, where the data is coming from, and then serving the ad in the middle. And to your point about user agents, and just something as simple as, we get asked all the time, we're a TV company, right? So we're selling OTT at scale now. One of the very common questions is, well, can you translate that into a GRP? You give me the denominator for that. Because if you think about how we even define something as simple as reach, everybody in the space is going to have a slightly different answer. When we look at it, we're trying to make a delineation between what we would consider like TV quality content against online video content. Just making that distinction itself disrupts the entire model. So it's not just about necessarily the tech being there. I think the tech is actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. I think it's the standardization behind the tech. It's making everybody agree to the same terms and really play by the same rules. Nielsen's worked for so long for linear TV because we've all just agreed to play by faulty math. So now that we have real data, that's the other thing with digital, right? You peel back the curtain and you can see raw data. So that information being much more reliable, much more kind of first party in a lot of cases, raises the bar, but it only raises the bar if we agree to play by definitions that all make sense.
I mean, I'll just jump in on that for Nielsen. You can't even target age and gender without a proxy on 9 out of the 10 platforms for OTT. So we can't even hit age and gender, let alone addressability down to shoe size.
So go ahead, Bernard.
Yeah, Roku was the first platform actually who started working with Nielsen and trying to understand how to create a ratings model, right? Because we saw that the buying wasn't changing, right? The way that the media buyers had traditionally been looking at their budgets, right? And where the ratings were going was not necessarily, those decisions were not necessarily in sync, but I think it was just also lack of experience around, how to start standardizing or convincing their clients that the right way to do this was slightly different, right? So as we've seen the ecosystem just evolve, I mean, I also would give it a 3. Definitely agree with everything that's been said. And I think that as an industry, yes, we really need to start coalescing here, because it's going to take a village for us to be able to make this successful, and that's where the audiences are. And we got to figure it out, and faster the better.
So some of our sponsors out there, Equifax, ShareID, are pretty excited about this because they have some technology or data services to help solve that problem. And it seems like we have a long way to go, Lionel, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, again, let me get back to what you said, one of our panelists here. You said all ads are pointless, right? That's what you see when you have OTT ads or what you see on TV. But on your Instagram feed, are the ads or the sponsored content pointless? No. So it's all about knowing your consumers, knowing how to target them, how to address them, how to have the good user experience to target your specific niche of consumers. And if you want to get the youngster generation, you might have a different strategy from what you would get with the senior or the other people, like the students, the young professionals, the teachers, the military, all the kinds of very loyal crowd you can target. And yeah, there are some techniques to help with that. We at ShareID we do that, but I don't want to transform that into a sales pitch, so I'll just stop there.
That's right. So I want to ping our Trender panel before we take questions. So guys, one of the implications here, and they haven't talked about it, they want to get better information about you. They have technology to do it. They want to map their advertising and the content to your specific desires in terms of what content you want. How much of your privacy are you willing to give up so they have a really good, accurate picture of you so they can match that content to you? Anybody want to jump in on that? Urzin, maybe?
I don't think there's much privacy. If you decide to go online, you're kind of screwed. So there's not really.
So you sign that user agreement when you sign up for something?
Pretty much, yeah. You got to stay off. So you have to stay off social media. Pretty much live in a cave somewhere. I mean, I don't think you have any privacy really.
Mm-hmm. And Donna, are you ever creeped out when you're sort of on Amazon and suddenly something pops up from your browsing experience and they're trying to sell you something?
No, it doesn't creep me out at
Okay.
all, yeah.
And how about you, Carissa?
No, but sometimes what creeps me out is when me and one of my family members are having a conversation and Alexa just pops up. So.
Okay, so where's Dave? Maybe he can do something about that for you. Okay, we only have 5 minutes for questions. So Donna, first question. Let's see. A lot of great things to discuss here. Oh, way back there, table 20, table 20.
Yeah, back to the trenders. I want to re-ask the ad question a little bit differently. So we got into the relevance, right? You all have you all bought something online? Searched for something that you wanted to get, and you bought something online. Okay, so there is a way to connect that. The other one is you all have some sort of passion, right? Whether it's running, hiking, fishing, whatever it happens to be. What if the ads were more relevant to you? I think that's what the whole question is getting to. And I think we got a little bit closer there with how much information you're willing to give up. But if we were to connect all those, then where do you want the ads? In other words, all the stuff, somebody's got to pay for this. That's the problem, right? And that's the topic of this discussion. But if you don't want the ads showing up in the middle of your content, kind of interrupting your experience, where would you want them?
Anybody want to take that? So let me ask you this, Chris. You said all ads are useless. Has there ever been an ad where you stopped and like, oh, that's kind of cool. It relates to me, and you watched the whole thing because it was interesting?
I think there was one about dancing and something because I dance, and I watched the whole ad, and it was all about back pains, but if you I don't know, but it was just it was about dancers.
So that pulled you in. It was like a pain medication or something. Okay.
It's
not targeted to your demographic, but probably more my age.
Just seeing the dancers, kind of.
Okay. Anybody else? Harrison?
I have bought items from my ads from my Instagram feed.
And Donna?
Well, I see most ads on Twitter, and they're very relevant to me. So if I have to look at ads, I'd rather see them if they're relevant.
Okay, and just a quick thing, would you rather see those little video ads before you watch your content and then have uninterrupted, or are you okay with little breaks in during your content?
Before. Yeah.
Carissa?
I would be okay if it was in between, like, the only, like, probably, like, near the end. Like, if it's, like, all, like, everything and then, like, in the end.
Okay, so you don't want to interrupt that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Post-roll, we're talking pre-roll, post-roll, mid-roll, don't worry about it.
What if you could skip the ad?
Other questions?
What if you
What you got, table 24, I think back there first?
Who was it over here?
Byron Valverde here, Spectrum Reach. You guys talked about standardization and stuff. So do we think that initiatives like OpenAP 2.0 and Project OAR are like the answer to where we need to get? Or is it just like crawl phases and, you know, we're going to try to test this out and understand what the standardization process entails before we actually get there?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, so Hearst is a part of the OAR initiative, and I think it's too early to say they're the answer, but I think it is the right move, right? I think these first initial steps of industry leaders coming together to just define the space, right? One thing we kind of glossed over a little bit, we were talking about how effective is the tech, how good can we get at advertising, we talked about standardizing the space, but to the user experience part of it, it's even something as simple as how do we generate a thoughtful frequency for a house that is jumping from multiple different platforms and multiple different viewing experiences, right? So initiatives like that go beyond just necessarily defining, hey, what's fraud? And they jump into, well, let's define what pipes we're going to use to pull all this stuff together. That way we're all operating on a platform. We can, respect the user experience a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think to Bernarda's point, even as a sell side, if we come to these conclusions, which I think is still a bit far off, to sort of agree and implement something, there's an entire buy side that needs to agree to those same standards, and that sort of pushes it out even further, I think.
And this is where it gets tricky, because you need the buy side to trust the sell side's consortium, right? Because, at face value, it's a yield management tool. Right? But the reality is it's a tool to make all of our lives better and keep the agency model alive. But I think it needs to be, both groups need to be bigger. You need a marketplace to move dollars at the end of the day.
So I think we have a future session on just standards in this case, because it's definitely pressing the industry. We have time for one more question. I think we had table 5, 7. Donna's going to choose here.
Hi, it's the doctor. So here's the question for the Trender panel. Sometime within the next 12 months, Netflix will introduce advertising and have 2 levels of service, $14.95 without advertising and probably $8.95, $9.95 with advertising. Trender panel, which one will you take?
I'll pay the 14.
I would pay the 14 as well.
I would too.
You'll ask your mom or dad to pay that.
That's interesting, because if you look at historically, ads have changed the way we produce content. They've changed the way we produce contents for series, and you have cliffhangers before the ads to make sure that you can be hooked and get back after the ads. Sports have changed. Basketball, 50 years ago, basketball, it was only 2 halftimes, no timeouts. Now we have 4 quarters plus a lot of timeouts, and guess what? That's only for the ads. That's not for the sport itself. So content is changing because of the ads. So it's really interesting to see that 100% of the Trender panel said we don't want ads.
So Tom, you opened this up and you get the final word.
Well, that's a pressure. No, I think, look, it's obviously, we're here because it's, it's exciting and seeing what the next, business models are. I think there's certainly a lot of potential. I think the biggest question I have, and it goes back to one of the questions, is can the industry, and by the way, this is something we all should kind of take as something we need to do if we're in the industry, is how do we ensure the industry continues to move forward, with some of these consortiums and some of this definition? I think when we saw, with Nielsen, it was simple. There was a company that came in, became the currency. I think with OpenAP and some of the divisions there, can the industry come together in a relatively quick way that is inclusive, that can generate the standards we need in order to move the business forward? That would be it's a hope, and certainly we're willing from where I sit, with the Weather Group to help in any way we can.
Thank you. That's a wrap. Let's give a hand to our awesome panelists. The Trender panel, thank you very much.